Welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm here with my co-host, Billy Thomas. And we really appreciate you being with us. And I guess welcome to Thanksgiving Eve.
Yes, Thanksgiving Eve. And, we're going to be celebrating that and all things woodlands and wildlife here in Kentucky. We're delighted to have you all with us for another great show today. Whether you're joining us via Zoom or if you're on Facebook Live, thanks for being with us. You can leave questions in the chat pod if you're on Zoom, and you can leave them in the comment section if you're on Facebook Live. But we're just glad to have you all with us on this great show today.
Definitely. And like I said, like we say, Billy, I think we say this every week, but we have another cram-packed show just for them. And we're going to start everything off with Autumn Olive. And we have Dr. Ellen Crocker on, and she wants to pull up there she goes. And can you give us a little description about what we're going to see today?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks for joining, everyone. And today we're going to continue our series on invasive plants with autumn olive, which especially if you live in the eastern part of the state, you are probably all too familiar with. But really, it's present in a lot of different areas. It's, most dramatically problematic on reclaimed mining areas where it can come in and thrive when few other things can, but it'll move in from there to all sorts of other sites. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it is, what does it look like, how do you identify it, its history, also how to manage it. So autumn olive is one of those plants, like many of our invasive plants, that how you manage it really depends. It depends on what you've got, where you're located, how much autumn olive you have. Is it one plant? Is it acres and acres of autumn olive? And so we're going to go into some of that information. And joining me today is Joe Emilian. He's a specialist in weed science in the plant science department here at the University of Kentucky. And he's got a lot of expertise in autumn olive as well as other, invasive plants and their management. So he and Jacob Muller are part of this woodland invasive plant series. So welcome, Joe.
Hi.
Do you have anything to talk about for autumn olive before we show your all's video? No? All right. I just wanted to make sure if you had any opening remarks that you would have those available. So, all right, Billy, you want to go ahead and show today's video, and then I will remind everyone that if you have any questions, make sure to type them in the chat pod and we will get them answered for you.
No doubt. So if you're a woodland owner or a property owner, pay attention and look and see if you've got this species on your property. So we'll go ahead and get that video rolling now.
Autumn olive is an invasive shrub that can rapidly colonize and outcompete the native plants you want to be seeing. While it's most problematic in reclaimed mining areas, it can be an issue in a lot of different habitats. Here we're going to talk about what autumn olive is, why it's a problem, how to identify it, and what you can do to manage it. Autumn olive is native to Asia. It was introduced in the 1800s and for many years was promoted for erosion control, as windbreaks, for many different purposes. Because of that, it's really widespread throughout the eastern United States, and you'll find it in a lot of different areas. I think it's most likely to invade in those old fields, reclaimed mining areas where there's been disturbances, but it can also be a problem in those closed canopy woodlands. Autumn olive is a deciduous shrub. Typically, it's going to grow, up to 20 feet tall. And while this can be a small tree, it's going to have a form that's really shrubby, lots of shoots, so not looking like most trees. Its stems are going to have a silvery or coppery color to them, a little bit of a sheen. The leaves of autumn olive are really distinctive in that the undersides have this very identifiable silvery color that lets you know it's autumn olive. On the top surface, it's going to be dark green, underneath this white to silvery color. The leaves are opposite to each other, and while the size can vary greatly, even on this one shoot, you can see you have smaller leaves and larger leaves. They have this very short petiole that attaches them to the stem. The flowers of autumn olive are fragrant, tube-shaped yellow color, and those will come out in the early summer. Those will develop into red berries that are really popular with wildlife, and autumn olive prolifically produces these berries, so many, many, many berries on a single bush. These berries are popular with wildlife and some humans as well. Autumn olive is widely distributed and it can thrive in a diverse range of habitats. While it prefers full light conditions, it can tolerate some shade. Similarly, while you'll typically find it in those open, early successional sites, you might also see it creeping into the more closed canopy woodland settings. Its seeds are very popular with birds and small mammals, so if you have one autumn olive bush, expect those seeds to be spread to new areas on your property and cause problems to pop up in years to come.
So you can see the effect that autumn olive has in the forest and on the landscape. Here where there's an absence of autumn olive, or rather where it's been controlled, you can see a diverse suite of species growing. On the other hand, where you see heavy amounts of autumn olive, there's really a lack of diversity in the forest and in the understory. When managing for autumn olive, it's really this sustained effort that has an impact on the landscape, and so we still need to consider this as part of our overall management strategies and think about this as a long-term sustained effort where we need to continue to come back to monitor and make sure that our efforts are successful, and if they're not, we need to continue to apply treatment, whether that's continued application of the herbicide in order to achieve our results and remove the autumn olive.
Well, we're going to take the opportunity, since we have a demonstration here, which was done, well, it was a clearing that was done on Robinson Forest. They took the dozers through here, cleared this area. You can see what the stand of autumn olive was like. Of course, it's had another year of growth, so it was thick, and really, there really wasn't any other, it was dominant. You really wouldn't have been able to do much here with anything. You're not going to send a bunch of people in here with chainsaws. They'd be at it forever. You may not see them out, and they may not appear back outside afterwards. So this is a year ago they cleared, and they knocked out a lot of the autumn olive, but as you can see, we have the remnants coming back from the roots. And in the year, they've done fairly well. Now, if we want to avoid this cycle and being on a treadmill of just coming back every few years and clearing again, at this point, we have less, there's less of them because we've knocked a lot of them out. We had some seeds come up. We've also had then regrowth from some of the remnant roots. But at this point, we might still have an opportunity, even this fall, to put a foliar herbicide down and then try and knock these back, hopefully kill the roots, and then we have it so that then we don't have to come back and clear right away, and we'd have an opportunity then for other vegetation to come in. We can replant something else and manage it, because at this point it's the size that yes, we can then get enough chemistry on here to kill it. In the fall, the translocation is down to the roots, so we're going to get more of the herbicide getting down there. At a size where then, yes, we should be able to kill them. We can spray some herbicide on those, but it's just going to shrug it off. Plus, with this as well, we'd be able to then get some decent control. And we'd use equipment because, in many cases we are going to be doing in some pretty rough situations. So yeah, we use the dozers, but for applying the foliar herbicides, we wouldn't necessarily want, a boom would be a hazard because, it can snag on something and then break, cause all kinds of issues. But there's boomless sprayers, boomless nozzles. The crew at the forest here, they have a Polaris where then they have a tank, and of course then they have boomless nozzles so they can go on either side, and they can treat the area and get good results. So with this, we just cut down one plant. Obviously, if we were trying to tackle a large area like this, we wouldn't be going at it, plant by plant with a chainsaw. There'll be other methods that are more efficient. But for this, just to demonstrate. So, cut it down. Now, this is not, we probably would have maybe wanted to cut it down a little bit closer so we're not tripping over it, but it's enough for our purposes. Or the thing is, if we were doing an area, we may then just leave them knee-high, so then we can then do the final cuts. Because all the plants, after we cut, are going to be responding with to repair the wound, which is going to interfere with the ability to take up the herbicide and get it down to the roots. So for this, we're doing a cut stump. We can use a buckthorn blaster as one way to do it. So we have a dye indicator, and for this, then we want to apply our herbicide on the small stems. For this, we can probably then, we can do the whole thing, but it's only the cambium where we're going to have the phloem that's going to be taking the herbicide down. So we can save ourselves a little bit of chemistry and just apply just on the edge where that is. We don't need to put it down in the center because that's where the xylem is, and it's not really going to be helping us. It's not going to take it down to the roots where we need it. So this way then, of course, then once we've done it, it shouldn't regrow on us because we'll, it won't resprout because we hopefully got the roots killed. Of course, we'll have to do follow-up treatments to make sure that we don't have seedlings come back in, or if we have missed any. And it is a sustained effort, but it is doable. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. If you want to learn more about managing autumn olive or other invasive plants in your woodlands, be sure to get in touch with your local cooperative extension office and check out our website.
Thank you, Ellen, and I guess Jacob and Joe also for doing that wonderful video on autumn olive. And, if anybody has questions, make sure to type them in the chat pod and we will get them to them. But, Ellen, I've heard that there are some other plants that look like autumn olive that people can get confused with. What kind of other plants are there?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind are other invasive plants that you might see in some similar habitats, in some similar cases. There's actually a really close relative to autumn olive called Russian olive that looks really similar, and we don't have as much of in this area, but it'll look very, very similar. But if you're looking at something and it's just slightly off, that could be it. But there's also privet, which is another invasive species that you might see in a lot of similar sites that can, really densely grow in the same way. And as we were just hearing from some other folks in the chat and otherwise, something that has been popping up a lot that people used to think was restricted to the central Kentucky area, but now they're finding everywhere, is bush honeysuckle, which is another invasive plant. It is everywhere in central Kentucky, but increasingly in other parts of the state as well. Again, these all have that shrubby form, really dense shrubby plants. Privet's going to be evergreen, but the others are going to kind of be the first things to get their leaves in the spring and the last to lose them in the fall. Really out competing some native plants. Can you think of anything else, Joe, that people might have their eyes peeled for?
Nothing comes to mind.
So speaking of that, I guess the main thing is you want to get rid of it. So Joe, you did mention that, but what kind of herbicide is the best one to get rid of autumn olive?
Well, typically our objective is to have selective control. Mm-hmm. So any of the triclopyr containing herbicides will be ones that you might want to consider. In a woodland situation, one of our go-tos is any of the herbicides that contain imazapic. Plateau is the trade name for the original version. Those are ones which have pretty good activity. And the imazapic has soil residual, so that will help then hold back maybe some of our herbaceous plants that might be coming in and competing with our seedlings that we're trying to promote. But those are probably two of our go-tos as far as then low cost and ones that are fairly efficacious.
And as with all things in extension, it depends, right? It depends is always the answer. And it depends on, your situation and your site. And I think Joe did a really nice job in that video of talking about some of the differences. Like, do you have acres of something? Do you have a few plants? And how your management approach is going to vary depending on that. It's tricky, right?
I'm sorry. I was going to say, Joe, I think one thing that would probably be impressive to a lot of people is how little herbicide was needed to control, on that example you showed there. I think a lot of times people may think that they're having to dump gallons and gallons of this stuff out there, but really you can get by with quite a little bit to still be effective as well.
Yeah, like with the cut stump, then we can be very precise. So we can, apply it if we have a handful of plants and deal with, those handful of plants and not damage anything nearby. It's also that then, and of course then, we if we have large areas, we can be using, area application, but depending on the situation, we may need to send crews in with backpack sprayers, and of course then we can be, again, we can be quite precise. So then we can take out the undesirable plants and we're not harming the other ones. And of course then they have the opportunity then to take up the sunshine and moisture that, our competing plants would have been doing and benefit from that.
I guess we would remind folks it's so much easier to treat one or two plants than an entire hillside of them. So, if you see these things, getting on them early can really save you a lot of grief down the road.
And speaking of someone actually doing that, Shad Baker, he's one of our extension agents, and he has been fighting with some autumn olive. And he happened to pop on today, and we told him that we could give him a few seconds to explain kind of what he's been having to deal with autumn olive. Shad, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I was amused by the timing of this. I had no idea that this was the subject today. You can tell that I'm not dressed for the office, but I came to do some invasive control. And we've got a really familiar situation to what you guys were talking about. This is the piece of property that we have adjoins an old strip mine site. And the property that the office is on was actually used when the bypass was built. So all of this is disturbed ground. There was a huge opening, and the songbirds spread the berries as they move around. And so when we first bought the property, it was just in a few places. And over time, it has spread and it has begun to colonize the entire 40 some acres. And if you get into a place where it's solid autumn olive, they can get to be really large bushes. And I would agree with what was said by Joe and Jacob. There's nothing that grows under these. I've been out deer scouting before, and if you get into an autumn olive thicket, there is no other plant under those bushes. So it's really important to control it. I feel it's kind of like eating an elephant. Once it gets so bad, you can't eat it all at once. So you just have to whittle at it. And I just wanted to add to what Joe said. We use imazapyr, and what's great about it is the control is year round. For a lot of chemicals, you have to use them while the plant is actively growing. But with that one, you can use it year round, even when the plant is dormant. So we go in, we've used the hack and spray method. And today I was doing the chainsaw, cutting the bush down, and then we just squirt with a little hand squirt bottle that we keep with us as we cut. And we've had good control, but it's a constant thing. You can't afford to give up on it, because otherwise you lose the entire, it's like an invasion. So you have to keep it beat back. When it gets really bad, Virginia Tech has done some work with helicopters and aerial applications. So it can get really, really bad.
Oh, goodness. Well, thank you for giving your experiences with it, Shad. We kind of roped you in at the last minute, so we greatly appreciate that.
But a good local reference there.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, our county extension agents are amazing folks.
They are.
They really are. They're doing so much great work all across the state. So thanks, Shad.
And we do have a question: is glyphosate effective?
And so, Joe, glyphosate, common ingredient and Roundup that people may be familiar with.
Yeah. Again, it's, you can use that like for the cut stump. That's one of the ones because it's easy. And just as long as you're applying it when, um, above freezing conditions and things like that, you can do that. So it's very effective. It's, and it's very targeted. You can potentially then use it as well if you're going to be doing area applications, targeting, and of course then realizing that you are then potentially then hitting other. It's not as selective, but again, where you put it, it should be. You'd want to put surfactant or something else in to help the chemistry then penetrate. If you're doing a foliar application, get through the cuticle and things like that. To help improve the efficacy.
I was going to say, Joe, could you speak a little bit about the timing? It might be a little bit different with this chemical than some of the others that like the shad you were talking about.
Well, yeah, the thing is, well, as well, the thing is if you are, then it's if it's cut stump, you have most of the season you can, except if it's since it's aqueous formulation, you want to be above freezing. There are other formulations for the cut stump where they have an oil base, and of course then you have a larger window, and of course you have a little bit more maybe flexibility as far as then, because the oil can then potentially penetrate through the callus and the wound response, so you have a little bit more larger window of application. As far as in the glyphosate, again, the time, most efficacious timing would be then when the plants are then translocating down to the roots. So later in the season, typically you'd have better results. But again, you can apply it year round, and you still get pretty good results. But you might get a little bit better there. It's also that then with area applications, potentially, I'm not sure if about the autumn olive. I do know that for bush honeysuckle, there have been areas and people that have gotten good results with area applications, and using for selective application for selective control, and then using the fact that the autumn olive holds onto the leaves later than most of our non-target species and leaves out earlier. So we sort of missed the window, but where then, of course, then the leaves are still there. Our other species that we want to protect have dropped their leaves. So then if we apply something like glyphosate, where it's only taken up by the leaves, it's not taken up by anything else. Any of the glyphosate that hits the soil is bound by the clay particles very quickly, so it's biologically unavailable. So then we have a window of application where we can apply it late in the season, and if the only thing that's green and still hanging on the leaves is what we want to control, then we have that targeted. We'd be able to target that and get good results, and we haven't harmed any of our non-target species, and we can do this over a large area, whether it's through ground application, or again, people, if you have a large area where then potentially area application, where then you'd be able to get that and get good results.
All right.
Good information.
Good information.
Again, folks, treat one plant instead of a hillside. That's my biggest advice.
Take them in baby steps, right?
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Joe, Ellen, and Jacob, thank you all very much for putting that segment together. You all are doing some great work with this program, so thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us on. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
All right. So,
All right, Renee, you ready to switch gears a little
ready
bit?
to switch gears? Yes.
Yeah, so we're
So
going to
let's move on to our tree of the week.
Yeah. Hey, Laurie.
Hey,
Hey,
Lauren, how are you?
Good, doing great. Hope everyone's doing great, staying healthy, getting ready for a yummy Thanksgiving. This week, the tree of the week is the black oak, and I chose it in part because it is an important wildlife tree, especially for our wild turkey. And since we're talking about turkey today, I thought it would be a good tree to introduce. So here's the black oak.
I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Forestry and Natural Resource Extension, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the black oak. Black oak, Quercus velutina, is a common tree of the red oak group. It is sometimes called yellow oak, quercitron oak, dyer's oak, or yellow bark oak. Black oak is a medium to large sized tree that typically grows 60 to 80 feet tall with a 2 to 3 foot diameter. However, on good forest sites, it may grow more than 120 feet tall and have a 4-foot diameter. Trees typically have an irregular crown and a tapering trunk. Trees can live to be about 150 to 200 years old. The wood is often marketed as red oak, and the acorns are an important wildlife food. Black oak is widely distributed throughout the eastern and central United States. It is a common component of the eastern and central upland deciduous forest, but also occurs in savannas in that transition zone between the eastern deciduous forest and the western prairies. Black oak is found on a wide variety of sites, from dry ridges to moist coves, with best growth on moist, rich, well-drained soils. However, it tends to be more abundant in the drier soils of the south and west upper slopes and ridges. Black oak is classed as intermediate in shade tolerance. It is less tolerant than white and chestnut oak, and it's about the same as northern and scarlet oak. Black oak is a deciduous tree with alternately arranged simple leaves, as you can see in the photo. The leaves are typically 4 to 10 inches long, obovate or ovate in shape, and they usually have 5 but sometimes 7 bristle-tipped lobes. The leaves growing in the shade typically have shallow sinuses like the leaf at the top, and the leaves growing in the sun typically have deep sinuses, the leaf on the bottom. Those are the sinuses are the indentations. The leaves are green above and pale below with fuzzy pubescence. Young leaves are usually reddish and very velvety, and fall color is dull red to orange. Black oak is monoecious, meaning a tree has both male and female flowers. The male flowers are in yellow-green, drooping catkins. You can see in the photo on the left the yellow arrows. Those are pointing to the male flowers. The female flowers are reddish and in short spikes in the leaf axils. The photo on the left, the white arrows are pointing to the female flowers, and then the photo on the right is a close-up of the female flower. The flowers bloom in spring between April and May, and the flowers are wind-pollinated. The fruit is an ovoid or egg-shaped acorn that's about 1/2 to 3/4 inches long, with a bowl-shaped cap that covers 1/3 to 1/2 of the acorn. They are brown when mature and slightly fuzzy. The acorns mature in 2 growing seasons and ripen in late summer and fall and then drop. They will germinate the following spring. The acorns are disseminated or dispersed by gravity and wildlife, including squirrels, mice, and blue jays. Both rodents and birds often cache or store the acorns in the soil. Trees begin seed production around 20 years, with best production between 40 and 75 years. Black oak is a consistent seed producer with good crops every 2 to 3 years. Black oak also regenerates via stump sprouting, but does so less frequently than northern, scarlet, and chestnut oak. The bark of black oak is smooth and gray on young oaks but becomes thick and rough with deep vertical furrows and horizontal breaks. The bark also darkens to nearly black. The inner bark is yellow-orange. The wood of black oak is light to medium reddish-brown in color, though there can be a fair amount of variation in color. Black oak falls into the red oak group and shares many of the same traits as northern red oak, Quercus rubra. Black oak is ring porous like other oaks. Ring porous wood has vessels in the early wood, the wood that's formed early in the growing season, that are distinctly larger than those in the late wood, the wood that's formed later in the growing season, of one growth ring. Ring porous structure is mainly present in regions with distinct seasons. Black oak has 2 to 4 rows of large early wood vessels and numerous small late wood vessels, which create a distinct and easily seen growth ring. Tyloses is absent in the pores as with the red oak group, and you can see comparison between red oak, in this case black oak, and white oak in the photos. Red oak, such as black oak, do not have the level of decay and rot resistance that white oak does. Black oak is an important wildlife tree. The acorns provide food for a variety of wildlife, including squirrels, mice, white-tailed deer, and wild turkey. In fact, a high percentage of the acorns are eaten by wildlife, leaving a low number of seeds for regeneration. The trees have high cavity value for wildlife as well. They are important nest sites for the northern flicker in Massachusetts. Black oak wood is commonly grouped with other red oak wood and is used for construction lumber, cabinetry, furniture, interior trim, flooring, veneer, fence posts, railroad ties, and firewood. The national champion black oak is in Hartford, Connecticut. It's 347 inches in circumference, 78 feet tall, with an 89-foot crown spread. The Kentucky champion black oak is in Boyd County. It's 232 inches in circumference, 108 feet tall, with a 207-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, check out American Forest Champion Trees or check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry Champion Trees. Now for a few fun facts about black oak. The black oak's common name refers to its nearly black bark. The oak's inner bark is a deep yellow or deep orange and was used to make a yellow dye for cloth called quercitron, which is where black oak gets several of its other common names, including dyer's oak, quercitron, and yellow bark oak. The scientific genus name Quercus is Latin for oak, and the species name Velutina is derived from the Latin word vellus, which means fleece, wool, or down, and refers to the velvety winter buds and young foliage. Thanks for joining me to learn about the black oak. I hope you get the opportunity to get out into your woodlands, local park, or neighborhood and enjoy the beautiful black oak.
Well, thank you, Lori, for doing that black oak segment. We greatly appreciate it. Remember, if you have any questions, to type them in the chat pod. But Lori, how can you tell black oak from other oaks?
It's not the easiest. Determining one oak from another can sometimes be tricky anyway. With black oak, what I like to look at is that you'll see the variability in the leaves. It's considered a plastic, so that you see that high variability in the leaves with deep sinuses or not deep sinuses. So that's a good one. That kind of fuzziness on the underside of the leaf. And on new stems, there'll be the new growth. They're going to be fuzzy. And then the fuzzy buds. Those are kind of some of the main things. And the bark too. But sometimes if the tree's younger, it's a little difficult to tell. So oaks are tricky.
Yeah, those leaves were very fuzzy when you had that picture. I was like, well, that's really neat.
I was going to say, Lori, I've seen black oak have a lot of variability in its leaf shape as well. So it can be a little more challenging.
Yeah, and so to me, that's one of those characteristics. And you can see that on the same tree. You're looking on this tree going, wow, these leaves all look different. Wait, let's look closer. Maybe I have a black oak here.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thank you, Laurie. Love the segment.
All right. So we're going to move on to our wildlife sound segment for today. Dr. Matt Springer, he is an extension wildlife specialist, and he cannot be with us today, but we are going to go ahead and play that video. And hopefully once you hear the sound, you will know what this sound of this animal is. Welcome to another edition of Wildlife Sounds from the Forest, and Matt's here joining us again, and we have a seasonally appropriate sound for today.
Yes, so one, not necessarily on the animal's biological season, but one on our stomach season, I guess, would be the best way of putting it.
Right.
So are you ready for me to get into it?
Let's go ahead and hear what this sound is.
All right, so this is our November edition Wildlife Sounds from the Forest. I think pretty much, I would guess about 95% of folks know.
I would say so. I would agree with that one. Well,
now,
let's see it anyway.
Yes. So now this is actually, you got a little bit of both male and female going there. But, if you haven't figured it out, this is one that you should know as probably our most popular game bird in North America, or one of the most popular game birds in North America, the wild turkey.
Wild turkey, yes. And I'm sure a lot of us will be participating in wild turkey tomorrow.
Yes. I would imagine a lot of folks are going to be sampling the domesticated version of the wild turkey. But, that one's probably the most well-known sound, right? That gobble. Now we've got a few other sounds that these guys make. One, guess I have to do that. There we go. With another button. So we've got a couple other sounds. These guys actually have a pretty diverse vocal repertoire in terms of communicating to each other.
Yeah, I would not say that's a turkey.
No, it's not one that people think of, right? And that's actually the hen, which is that higher pitch. She's walking around letting either other hens know where she is. She sounds a little upset, actually.
She does.
You know, so they may have called her in, and she's one of the things that you can do, tricks that turkey hunters will do, is they'll actually interrupt the hens and talk over them. And evidently, female turkeys do not like to be talked over, and they
Interrupted.
come in looking for a fight, right? So that's one of the things. And she's just making some yelps, is what they're called.
Mhm.
And then there's yelps, there's clucks, there's also called a kiki, which is something we're not going to get into. And then there's a couple others that are behaviorally related here.
Mhm.
So like this one, which is, you hear some soft yelps and then a very quick sounding dog, and then and then some very fast, what we call a cackle, right there at the end. And that actually is something that we hear right as the turkey will fly down out of the tree. It's called a fly down cackle. So those are some of the examples of sounds that turkeys make.
Mhm.
Obviously, there's quite a few more, but some that most folks may hear if they're walking in the woods, especially.
Right. So I've seen a lot of turkeys that have white feathers. Is that the domesticated?
No, so there's actually a genetic variant out there. Actually, I've seen quite a few of them in north central Kentucky. They are often referred to as the smoky phase, and it's just a little bit, so they're not necessarily crossbred with domestic turkeys or anything. It's actually a small variation in the wild population. Just like, hens can actually have the beards like the gobblers have.
Mhm.
Good percentage of hens actually have that.
Mm.
So there's some variation naturally occurs in the populations.
Okay. And how many, what are they called?
Poults.
Poults. Okay. How
I
many
knew you were
poults
gonna
do
ask
they
that.
have?
So usually a hen in the spring will lay between 10 and 12 eggs in a nest before she starts incubating them. Now they're very low on the totem pole in terms of being eaten. So a lot of times their nests will get raided by things like skunks and raccoons and possums. Every once in a while, a coyote may happen across them, or a bobcat. But usually she'll have about 10 to 12 eggs, and if she's successful in incubating them, those poults will grow fairly quickly, eating insects and berries. But they also are very exposed to elements, environmental elements, wetness and cold. The first week or two can take a few out on top of predators.
Mm. And do they build their nests on the ground or up in the trees, or?
They are a ground nesting bird, and they will nest in the forest next to a down log. Just basically make a little bowl out of leaves in the dirt. In the grasslands, they'll just kind of find a clump of grass and lay next to it, or underneath the native grasses. They'll get under it, and they it takes them they lay one egg a day, just like chickens. So it takes them a while, and what they usually do is they'll actually have their nest site, they'll lay an egg, and then they'll run away from it and go hang out in a completely different area, and then come back to it and lay another egg the next day, and then run away, because they don't want to draw attention to where those eggs are.
I see.
So they will actually do quite a bit of running around, per se. So they don't stick around until they start incubating those eggs.
Okay. And I never thought of them as big flyers, but it look like they could fly?
Oh, they are, so usually adults and juveniles, as soon as they can, will roost in trees at night, because that's where they're the safest. So the ground predators are the highest on the list. Every once in a while, a great horned owl may try to take out a turkey in a tree, but they're very limited in terms of what's after them when they're up in a tree. But most of the time during the day, they spend walking around on the ground.
Well, you have any other fun facts for us for this day before Thanksgiving special, I guess you'd say?
No, other than I hope everyone's able to enjoy their meal tomorrow, and this very different looking Thanksgiving this year. But I hope everyone has a great holiday.
All right. You too. Well, I really liked that segment, and Matt's not able to be here, but we have done something again. We have Zach Danks on here. He's the Rough Grouse and Wildlife Turkey coordinator for the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we kind of roped him in at the last minute. Literally, I think he was just on the show, and so we were like, "Hey, see, that's what happens when we know who you are." So thank you for joining us. And do you have any other interesting facts that you want to talk about turkey that maybe we didn't just talk about?
Good deal. Yeah, I just happened to be watching. I tuned in a couple times, but I was doing some very boring data entry today and database management. So this was like a nice lunchtime distraction for me. But yeah, it was cool. I saw Lori talking about black oak. I've always liked black oak. When I was younger, back home in Logan County, that was one my granddad taught me. He worked for Division of Forestry as a ranger back in years ago. So he taught me that tree. So I always associate that with my home farm, even though it's distributed across the state, and turkeys do like to eat it. So I guess for turkeys this time of year, the cool thing is that, you know, wild turkeys are very, very popular in the springtime when they're mating. You know, that's when we usually hunt them. But fall's a really fun time too. You can catch some really neat behavior. Just yesterday, I was deer hunting, and I was hearing turkeys gobble. I saw a group of hen turkeys, and fall turkey hunting is really neat because just the way they're grouped up, they'll sort of fight a little bit and banter about trying to establish their dominance. So if you get a chance, whether you're hunting or you're just out and about, try to enjoy them, because it's really a neat spectacle if you can find a good hiding spot, get camouflaged and watch them. So,
Hey, Zach, would you speak a little bit about the distribution of turkeys across the state?
Yeah. So they're across the state. They're in every county. We have open hunting seasons in every county. They were pretty much wiped out from all of Kentucky except what is now Land Between the Lakes. So back in for a long time, up until about the 70s, there were many attempts to move these birds around. But starting in the 70s, our former turkey coordinator, a guy named George Wright, he's very innovative, and he went to other states and he orchestrated some wildlife translocations, we call them. That's where we get wildlife from one place and put them out in their native range. And so we got turkeys from Missouri, from Iowa, Kansas, all kinds of different all states that still had remnant populations. And we use those to restock our state. And with protections for several years in place, they grew rapidly, and they've established in every county in the state now. So it's really a neat success story, and that was done in all the states across the United States. Almost every state has wild turkeys, and that same process happened because they were mostly wiped out, you know, after settlement.
I was going to say, wasn't it Ben Franklin that wanted the wild turkey to be our national bird?
Yeah, that's what they say.
Yeah.
Turkeys were really important in settlement, you know, in our country's history. So it's really neat that they're back now. So, and I'll just say too, since we're talking forestry and we talked about management of autumn olive, black oaks, all this stuff goes together because turkeys are a forest species. You see them out in fields, but they're always going to be in and around the forest. So anything we can do to manage the forest, to control those invasives, so we have good growing space for the good native trees we need, that's a good thing for turkeys. So.
I was going to say, Zach, one of the things we try to do with this show is really highlight the compatibility of kind of woodland and wildlife management and how they can go hand in hand. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want our viewers to know about what you do?
I guess one thing I'm doing is I'm working up some data on a survey. So I survey our turkey hunters, both to get their opinions on things and also to help me track turkey populations. So that's an interesting thing. I do. It's like a little bit of social science research, I guess you'll say, along with, you know, tracking populations and numbers. And occasionally we'll catch turkeys. We'll put some GPS transmitters on them so we can follow them around and see where they're using. That's some of the more fun stuff we get to do. Unfortunately, that stuff doesn't occupy too much of my time. It's a lot of less fun stuff, but it's all in an effort to try to sustain turkey populations for the citizens of the Commonwealth. Yeah. So.
You know, Zach, I know you've also spent a lot of time working on rough grouse and trying to get that established, and we've done a lot, you know, here.
Yeah, right behind you.
You know, and I hear a lot of woodland owners, you know, asking where are the rough grouse and what's going on with them, you know, and I know you're really trying to help us get that population back up and thriving. You got a couple comments on that?
Yeah, actually, I'll start off by talking about a common theme that I hear is, especially from grouse hunters, is that ever since wild turkeys were brought back in and reestablished, ruffed grouse numbers have gone down. So there's a tendency to blame turkeys for destruction of grouse populations, and that's a case of correlation does not imply causation. Basically, what that means is at the time we were restoring wild turkey populations, their numbers were growing, and grouse populations went down. That wasn't a product of the two species interacting, because while they would meet in the woods occasionally, it wouldn't. There's not a population level problem. It's a product of our forests are maturing. They're becoming much more suitable for turkeys, and ruffed grouse, they've lost their habitat. Okay, so they need the younger stages of forest growth, and we're not cutting forest at the same rate that to produce that young forest habitat. We don't have old farm fields; they're reverting, and so grouse have lost their habitat. But there's this sort of tendency sometimes to blame one or the other, and that's just it's just not the case. So the two species are very interesting. Turkeys are doing really well. Ruffed grouse are not doing very well. They're both forest species, but they got their own challenges. So yeah, we got to do everything we can to sustain ruffed grouse too. You know, in this modern era where they just don't have a lot of habitat. So that's where it's important to work with UK Forestry Extension and Division of Forestry, the Forest Service, to try to educate landowners about proper forest management and to manage our public lands. So.
Hey, Billy, is a light bulb going off for you? It sounds like
no.
another show for me.
You know, I've had a chance to know Zach for a while, and I really am impressed with him as an individual, but also the great work he's doing with Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. So, yeah, Zach, we'll have to have you on in a longer segment soon, because I think there's a lot we can explore with kind of the work that you're doing for sure.
Oh, I thank you guys for what you do. You're getting the word out to landowners, so that's super important.
Right.
Thanks for having me on. I'm glad
we appreciate you doing it. Spur of the moment.
It worked out. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
Have a good Thanksgiving, Zach.
Y'all too. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right. Now, moving on to our next segment, we're actually going to figure out how to cook those turkeys. So we have Martha Yant on, and she is going to give us a little demonstration on cooking turkey. Martha, you want to explain a little bit about what your segment's about?
Sure. And I really hate that I don't get to cook in person today, because when I cook in person, then I get to eat afterwards. But thank you all for working around my schedule and letting me join in even with some other commitments today. So some of you are very familiar with Cook Wild Kentucky, which is a project that the Nutrition Education Program at UK and also Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, Feeding Kentucky, and some other groups are working together. We just have 7 new recipes that have been released, and the one in the little video you're going to see in just a minute is one of those. It's a wild turkey broccoli casserole. And so sorry again that it isn't live. You'll see me talking to people who aren't here and also referring to things that aren't happening, because it is a video that was done for training earlier in the month, and it worked out. So I'm going to be on to answer questions after, and Renee, if you want to go ahead and roll that.
All right.
Did change a few things in it, like I usually do, just because I don't like to wash dishes. And so instead of steaming the broccoli in a separate pan, I just steamed it in the microwave right in the dish that I'm going to be using to bake this. So I've already steamed. This is about 2 heads of fresh broccoli, but you can use frozen. You can use 2 10-ounce packages. And you steam that to get it mostly cooked and warm before you start. And then I'm going to add our turkey. Now, if you are not lucky enough to have 4 cups of leftover wild turkey, then you can use domestic, just like Jan was telling us, that these recipes, if you don't have the wild meat, you can use a substitution of a different wild game meat, or you can use a domestic variety. So this is 4 cups of cooked turkey meat. And there are different ways to cook this, and I've done it in the crock pot and in a pan covered with foil in the oven. But my favorite way for wild turkey, and really my favorite way for domestic turkey, is to use a roasting bag. in the oven because that helps seal in the moisture, but it also lets the flavors develop a little more. In the crock pot, we don't get that caramelization when it browns. And if you just use a regular pan with some foil over it, you lose some of the moisture. So I really like using the oven roasting bags. And then once the meat is cooked, you can slice and serve it for your Thanksgiving dinner, or then for this recipe, you can chop it or shred it to use that. And now we're going to make the topping on this. So in this bowl, I have 2 cans, and I made a substitution on personal preference, Jan. The recipe says cream of chicken soup, and I've used cream of mushroom instead just because that's what I like. And plus, I had that in my cabinet already. And it says to use lower sodium. So these 2 cans are the same brand, but they're a little bit different. This one says Healthy Request, and this one says 25% less sodium. So if I was in a hurry and at the store and I was looking for lower sodium, I have high blood pressure, so I try to watch my sodium. I might think that this was the better choice as far as sodium goes. But when I look at the label, it turns out that this one actually has a significant amount less sodium than this one that said less sodium. So read your labels. Don't be distracted by the big banner on the front of the package. Turn it over on the back and look at the nutrition facts label, and then you can find out exactly what you're getting. You can substitute cream of chicken, cream of mushroom, cream of celery in this recipe, depending on which flavor you really like the best. Then we're going to add a cup of light mayonnaise. And yes, we've talked about mayonnaise before. There's mayonnaise and there's whipped salad dressing, and those can be used interchangeably depending on what you like the best. I do like the one that's the whipped salad dressing because it has that vinegar and a little more sugar in it, and it makes it tangy and sweet. Regular mayonnaise is mostly eggs and oil and just a little bit of sugar, and it has just a real creamy flavor, but you can use whichever one that you like the best. And then in that, we're going to add a tablespoon of lemon juice, a little more zip, and then our seasoning can either be a teaspoon of curry powder, and if you don't like curry powder or you don't have it or have access to it, you can use a tablespoon of prepared yellow mustard, just like the kind you put on your hot dogs. So curry powder itself is not a single spice. There's not a curry plant that it comes from. It's a blend of ingredients that give this very characteristic flavor and color and a little bit of heat because it does have just a little bit of cayenne in it. So if you've never tried curry, you might try it and put a little bit in and see if you like it. But I do like the curry flavor, and so I'm adding that in. And this is going to be, you know, we make so many different kinds of casserole dishes, and this adds flavor, and it's also a binder on that. So we just stir that, see if I can get arranged where I can reach a little bit better. And then I'm going to spread that over the top of my turkey and broccoli. I already have the oven on and preheating so that it will be hot when we put this in. And we should work out just about perfect, I think, while Becky is talking with us. And Becky, you'll have plenty of time on that. Take your time. And then it should finish up just about the end of our time for today. So I'm going to spread that over the top. As it bakes, this mixture will thin down and it will go down to get all the way through the recipe. And then a little topping on the top, and people have a lot of different favorites for that. Today we're going to use a half a cup of panko breadcrumbs. Now you can use regular breadcrumbs too. You can use the ones that you buy at the store in a canister, or you can just use pieces of bread, toast that, and then crumble it up with your fingers or throw it in the food processor if you have one. But the difference in panko breadcrumbs is the texture. So it's still basically just breadcrumbs, but the flakes are a little bit bigger and it makes it a little crunchier than just a regular breadcrumb. And we're going to put in a half a cup, so that was a half a cup of breadcrumbs, 1/2 cup of shredded cheese. I'm using Colby Jack because that's what I have. But the recipe calls for cheddar, but you can use your favorite kind of cheddar cheese. And the ingredient that I forgot today was a tablespoon of butter. So it's going to be okay with this that I've forgotten the butter. And I'm going to sprinkle that across the top. It's going to add a little bit of color, a little bit of flavor, and a little bit of crunch on the top too. Okay, well, I hurried this up just a little bit, but you can see that the top is already starting to get brown, and the sauce is starting to bubble a little bit. And when we spoon that out, ooh, it's steaming, and oh, it smells good. Too bad you can't smell it. We've got that broccoli that's not overcooked. We've got lots of chunks of turkey. And then we've got our cheese and crumb topping on that. So the other thing that I forgot in my stuff today is a fork, which is really sad. But after I turn the camera off, I think I can probably make good use of a spoon.
Really appreciate you doing that video and coming in. It looked really good. Now I'm really hungry. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat pod for us. But Martha, about how long does it take to bake that recipe?
It just takes 30 to 45 minutes once you have it put together. Everything in it is already cooked, and so you're reheating. And I know that having tasted a roasted wild turkey, you may find that domestic turkey just doesn't quite hit the mark. But if that's what you have, you can still use it.
Okay, sounds good.
That's a great program you all have got going on, Martha, and it's a great way to kind of utilize some of these animals that are being harvested. So thank you all for what you're doing, and plus you're turning this on to some really tasty food.
Well, it all works together. You know, we have the forest, we have the forest wildlife, we get to eat the wildlife, so it's all good.
And Martha, could you give us that website again where those recipes are located?
Yes, and I'll put it in the chat box too.
Awesome.
It's planeatmove.com.
Oh, that's simple enough.
That'll take you to all of the nutrition education program recipes. And if you sort by category, you can ask for all 24 of the Cook Wild Kentucky ones. So there's different game there. There's turkey, there's venison, there's squirrel. No, we haven't gotten the squirrel. It's still in development, but as soon as we can get back and working on that, we'll have squirrel recipes. We do have a turtle one, and so there are some fish ones too.
Wonderful.
We'll have you back in the future, Martha.
Yeah, we'll have you back at each season. Let's do something different.
I love it. So, and I'm so glad I got on today just in time to hear the tree of the week. I love that. And now I know there's also a sound of the week, or a wildlife sound. So I enjoy learning those things.
Wonderful. Well, we greatly appreciate you coming on too and doing these for us.
Renee, another great show, and a big thanks to all of our viewers out there. Certainly, again, whether you're joining us via Zoom or via Facebook Live, thank you so much. Leave us questions or comments. You can always check out recordings of the show at FromTheWoodsToday.com. And, we'll look forward to seeing you all next week.
Yep. Next week at 11 every Wednesday. And so just make sure you tune in with us, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving tomorrow.
Yes,
Take care.
Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye-bye.